Hey pups, RP here, and welcome back to another fanfiction reading, and we are continuing with the fanfiction from the Random Pokemon fan comic, Fear of the Dark. As always, links to everything are in the description, the original creator of Random Doom, as well as the original author to the fanfiction. And with all that being said and done, let's continue with part numero dos. Cotton and Vincent were now walking by a lake. The little Riolu still held tightly to the Benary's fluff, not daring to lose his grip. "Don't worry, we're almost there," she tried, smiling at him, but Vincent's eyes were shut tightly. They came to a stop at a tree nearby the moonlit lake. "Just wait a little here, okay?" she asked. Vincent nodded and released his grip, much to Cotton's relief. She began to approach a tree when she heard some buzzing. Almost instantly, she felt Vincent's grip once more. "What was that?" he asked, looking around nervously. Cotton just smiled and giggled a little. This was part of her plan. She knew that buzzing. She had heard it earlier that same day. They had been training nearby, and had caught a brief glimpse of a particular wild Pokemon swarm. Cotton realized Vincent wasn't going to release her, so as she approached the tree, the buzzing became stronger. Vincent tightened his grip, and then the buzzing came to a stop. Excuse me?" the Benary asked in a yell. Was Cotton talking to the tree? Vincent's question was answered almost instantly. About 23 fire-like Illuminous and Volbeat appeared all around them, their wings flapping violently. Vincent hid his face under his paws, and even Cotton began to feel nervous. "Is there a human trainer with you?" asked a Volbeat. No. We're on our own," the Benary said nervously. She hadn't expected them to react this way. The wing flapping ceased. "Oh, that's good to hear," said an Illuminous, as her expression turned into a smile. Suddenly, everyone in the swarm did the same. It seemed they held no aggression towards them. Excuse me?" asked Cotton once more. "Yes," replied another Volbeat, smiling. "We need some help." "Oh? What happened?" he asked with a concerned look. "Well, you see, my little friend here's afraid of the dark," Cotton said, as Vincent felt himself shrink, not feeling too proud about Cotton's comment. "Oh, poor little guy. Is there something we can do?" asked another Luminous, touched by Vincent's current state. "Well, I was wondering if you could," started Cotton. The Volbeat and Illuminous seemed to understand. "Oh, of course. Well, we don't do it unless it's the mating season, but I guess we can make an exception." "Let's do it, darling," said the Illuminous. They flew back to the rest of the swarm, and after a few murmurs, all of them flew up high into the sky. They began to fly in a wide variety of spins and dives, and as they did so, they were leaving behind a bright-colored trail of light. The colors were ever-changing, and the light didn't seem to vanish instantly, but remained there for a few seconds, and this was reflected in a mirror-like fashion on the moonlit lake. Cotton was awestruck, to say the least. She turned towards Vincent. He was almost hypnotized by this state. The lights reflected on his still, tearful eyes, making them look as though they were sparkling. She could tell he was no longer afraid. She sighed deeply. Rupert was catching up with the previous faraway light. She might be able to hear him now. "Veruka!" "Rupert?" The female Monferno came to a stop. She turned around and noticed her friend. He was almost out of breath. "What are you doing here at this time of night?" she asked as she approached Rupert. "I should be asking the same thing." "Well, ever since evolving, I don't sleep too much. I only need a few hours, and, well, I gotta go do something at night, so I normally train, or just take a stroll around here. That way I don't wake everyone up or get bored." "But what are you doing here?" she asked with a hint of surprise, puzzlement, and joy. "It's Vincent. He woke up." "Oh, I thought he wasn't supposed to wake up until tomorrow." "What stamina, though?" "He had a nightmare. He was totally scared, and the campfire was out. He's also afraid of the dark." Veruka did know that last part, and knew the reason behind Vincent's fear. A few days ago, he had been stuck in a dark cave. She had been the one to rescue him. Ever since then, he had been afraid of the dark. "I better go light the campfire back up again," she said as a smile came to her face. She seemed to look at the Riolu as a little brother by now. They then began their way back to the ranch. Ross was still asleep, and still in Jenna's arms. He suddenly woke up breathing heavily. "Vincent! Oh dear, I fell asleep!" For how long? He turned his head to Jenna's alarm clock. Only a few minutes had passed. Thank goodness. Not to wake up Master Jenna. He tried pushing her, calling her, even poking her. Nothing seemed to work. What to do? The Volbeat and Illuminous ended their light show after a few minutes. After Cotton and Vincent thanked them, Vincent still held to Cotton and began their way back to the ranch. Feeling better? She asked, noticing that he was no longer crying. I think so, but still, he replied in a low, timid voice. You're still afraid of the dark, aren't you? The Riolu lowered his head. Don't worry, it's normal, I suppose. It's nothing to be ashamed of. For the first time since waking up that night, a grin seemed to appear on Vincent's face. Cotton was relieved by this. Vincent was still afraid, but he wasn't as nervous as before. This time, he might be afraid of the dark, but he wasn't alone. He knew that his teammates, no, his friends were there for him. That he had someone he could trust. It wasn't long before they got back to the ranch. Napoleon was still awake, not able to sleep. Deep down inside him, he was worried about the young Riolu. Vincent noticed a light in the distance, and it wasn't exactly the now-lit campfire. Veruka! He exclaimed excitedly as he ran towards the Monferno. He wrapped his arms around her, and once more, broke into tears. Vincent, it's okay, see? The campfire's lit again. Veruka normally would have pushed him away, since she knew he would only be trying to flirt with her. However, she knew this time that flirting was not his intention. She knew how scared he was, and she understood that. She returned the hug, not caring if it wasn't her best decision. Veruka, I was so afraid. I know, but don't worry, it was just a bad dream, she said in a low, soothing tone. The Riolu just sobbed harder. Do you want to tell me about it? She asked in a caring tone. Vincent sniffled. He tried his best to keep himself calm, yet a few tears were still rolling down his face. I was in that cave again, but this time, he said between sobs. He had his eyes closed. Veruka could tell he was struggling not to burst into tears again. This time you didn't find me. I was trapped in there, unable to move. He was almost out of breath before breaking into uncontrollable tears. Veruka couldn't avoid it. She was touched by Vincent's fear. She embraced him tighter, in a caring way, as though trying to shield him from his fears. It's okay. It's okay. It was just a dream. I'm here now. We all are. It's no longer dark. There's nothing to be afraid of. See? She said lowly, patting his back in a soothing way. Vincent was slightly comforted, but he was still sobbing hard. He wiped his tears and tried to regain himself, still sniffling. No, see? I was scared at first, but I realized it was a dream. It wasn't real. I tried to calm down, but everything was dark. It was just like in my dream. And then I tried looking around, but I didn't see your light. Then I... He said between sobs. His eyes were closed tighter. Tears continued falling down heavily across his face. His voice broke, and he was shaking. Try not to burst into tears once more. I thought something had happened to you! He was overwhelmed. He didn't resist. He held his grip tighter around her. He held his grip around her tighter, as though he hadn't seen her in years. Tears clouded his sight, as he began sobbing uncontrollably once more. Veruka's face started sporting a light pink blush. Even surrounded by his worst fear, he was still worried about her. She didn't know or remembered anyone else to do so. She lowered her head, right next to Vincent's, and didn't bother releasing him. It seemed he cared about her, even more so than he feared the dark, and she couldn't help but feel deeply touched by this. I'm okay, Vincent. See? I was just out there taking a night stroll. Actually, you did worry me out there, said Rupert. Me too. Well, you had us all worried, said Cotton as she approached Napoleon. Really? Well, that means a lot, you guys. I guess I won't do it again. Nights are gonna be long, though, she said, puzzled yet touched that they all cared about her. Ross was having a hard time waking Jenna up, or at least setting himself free. He tried everything without successful results. Then, an idea came to his mind. He wasn't very fond of it, and there had to be another way. Yet, nothing else he seemed to try worked. Oh, forgive me, Master Jenna, he said as he felt guilty for what he was about to do. He started building electricity inside him and zapped his master. Ah! Ross! What was that for? She yelled angrily. Tears appeared in Ross's eyes. He looked up at her in a pleading way. However, Jenna was untouched by his charm ability. It was then he remembered that his ability no longer worked ever since evolving into a Pikachu. Knowing what would happen next, he began dashing away from her. Where are you going? Come back here! she yelled as she began pursuing him. Ross found himself trapped. The front door was closed, and his angry trainer was drawing near every passing second. In a desperate attempt, he crossed between Jenna's legs, climbed up the kitchen cupboard, opened a window, and jumped down to the outside of the ranch house. He was hurt due to the fall, but didn't remain there and didn't complain. He just kept running away. Jenna, furious by her Pikachu's strange behavior, began to follow him outside. This was part of Ross's plan, yet he was still scared of what would happen next. He was drawing near the campfire, but he was hurt and was on 3 legs. Suddenly, Jenna caught up with him. Ross took notice, and he turned to face his master, his eyes watering. He looked up at her and began to bow before her, pleading for mercy. Unknown to him, he was just next to the campfire. Jenna came to her senses once again. Something was out of place. The campfire was lit, and it was past midnight. Also, most of her Pokemon were awake. What the heck happened here? She asked with a puzzled look on her face. She looked around expecting the worst, and saw her young Riolu. He was awake. She was surprised by this. He had exhausted himself, and wasn't supposed to wake up until the next morning. Or that's what they all expected. She caught a better glimpse, and noticed there were tears remaining in his eyes. He must have been crying. Maybe he's hurt. Poor little guy. He trained so hard. Everything must be aching him, she thought as she got nearer. Did Vincent wake you all up? She asked all of her Pokemon. Everyone nodded back at her. It was the best explanation they could give her. Come here, Vincent, she called open-armed as she knelt down to the ground. Vincent ran tearfully towards her to wrap himself in her embrace and sobbed hard against his trainer's chest. Jenna held Vincent in her arms and inspected the little Riolu's body, but didn't find any broken bones, nor any bruises, not even a scratch on him. And he didn't seem to complain as she patted different parts of his body, yet tears still covered his face. Whatever it was, it couldn't be that urgent. Or was it? Whatever it is, I better take him inside, she thought as she regained a standing position, still holding Vincent in her arms. I'm taking Vincent inside with me, so don't worry. Go back to sleep, everyone. She made sure her Pokemon understood her before making her way back to the ranch house. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe he's just hungry. He didn't have dinner. Or he's just nervous. Something must have happened to him. Also, he's afraid of the dark after all. I'll leave the lights turned on, just to be sure he doesn't feel scared. Or maybe, she thought while she kept walking. But then she was stopped in her tracks. When she felt something nudge her leg. Choo! She heard the voice of her pleading Pikachu, grabbing her by the ankle. He seemed to be asking for her forgiveness. Aww, it's okay, Ross. I know why you did it. And you know, I can't stay mad at you, she said as she patted the Pikachu's head. Ross felt relieved by this. He gave her a polite smile, and then went back to his sleeping place, near the nest. Jenna also continued her way. He can be a little troublesome, isn't he? Asked Rupert. A little? Replied Veruka. Rupert understood the point of her answer. Memories from the past 4 days came to her. She had already become used to him being with them. Guess you're right, but a smile came to her face. It's not that bad. That's true. I'm really fond of that kid. Rupert let out a loud yawn and went back to sleep. Veruka did the same. She was starting to feel drowsy too, and it wouldn't be long before the sunrise. Hey pups, RP here, and welcome back to another fanfiction reading, and we are continuing with the fanfiction from the Random Doom Pokemon fan comic, Fear of the Dark. As always, links to everything are in the description, the original creator of Random Doom, as well as the original author to the fanfiction. And with all that being said and done, let's continue with part numero dos.